kick off this evening's session, which is insurance barriers to care. And if our panelists want to go ahead and start joining, that would be great. But really excited for this session tonight. A few housekeeping reminders just before we get started here. Tonight's session will last from 7 to 7:50 Eastern Time. And we're honored to have our very own Mark Hobrach and Miriam Goldstein from our policy team here at HFA. And joining us tonight is Marla Feinstein from NHF's policy team. So great minds, could not have three better policy brains here tonight with us. So very happy to have that. All attendees will be in mute, though we are a question and answer session tonight. So make good use of your chat box, your Q&A box. We're going to be watching both and try to answer all of your questions as they come in live. No slides. This is the only slide that you're going to see tonight. If you do have any technical difficulties, though, within the chat or need to speak with someone from HFA, just put your concern in the chat box, or you can go over to our Slack environment, the hashtag help desk, and voice your concern there. So with that, that's all of the housekeeping. Let's get to the fun world of insurance. We know that as bleeding disorders patients, it's critical. We have to have good coverage. Unfortunately, there's probably going to be a barrier to care. There's going to be a hurdle to cross at some point. So that's what we want to talk about tonight, or what are some of those hurdles? How can we cross those barriers? And Marla, I'm going to come to you first because this is the hot topic of the year, right? Copay accumulators. So here's a question that I'm going to start us off with before the audience hops in, because I know it's going to come in anyway. But my copay assistant card isn't being accepted by my insurance company. What can I do? I can't afford to pay thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket expenses.
Right. So it's likely one of two things. There's something called the Copay Accumulator Adjuster Program, which means that copay cards from any manufacturer do not count, right, towards your out-of-pocket max or towards your deductible. So you need to basically exhaust the copay card, and then they're still requiring you to pay thousands of dollars, towards your deductible before you can access your drug. What you can do is kind of limited, right? In that once you have an accumulator, it's hard to sort of go back, to where you were without an accumulator. It's likely that this primarily affects high deductible health plans. So it's likely that you may have a high deductible health plan. And we know that in certain states, it's more prevalent. With certain insurance carriers, it's also more prevalent. There are assistance programs that you can apply for. In general, some of the assistance programs are, you have to qualify based on your income. So you will have to enter certain, parameters, things that, you would only enter to a third party, not me. I know HFA has Helping Hands. There's also the PAN Foundation. And each program has different qualifications. And then that's super important to note, right? Is that just because Helping Hands has one program, it doesn't mean that PAN is going to accept that, have the same criteria. What you can do is next time if you know that you have what your options are for 2022, you can reevaluate your policy choices and enroll in something different, because it's quite likely, as the number of policies that don't allow copay assistance to count increase, you're probably going to have it on your policy again, especially if you choose a high deductible health plan. Yeah. But you can always ask your employer if you're comfortable with that, if you're comfortable with disclosing to your employer how what your personal situation is and what your and not everyone is, and that is a very personal choice whether to disclose or not. I can assure you, in the 10 years I've been in this community, they probably know you exist, and you're not really hiding. So there's also that, but you can ask them not to have a program um, which disproportionately affects those who spend the largest amount out of pocket, and those are likely, individuals in the community or anyone really with a chronic healthcare condition.
Yeah.
And we could help you.
just-
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, the
I was
three
just
here.
gonna chime in, we're approaching open enrollment. And so this is the time when you're picking your plan for next year. And so it's a time to read your plan options really closely. Now, the problem is that these copay accumulator adjusters are couched in incredibly obscure language. Your plan document may be 250 pages long, but your HTC social worker is a resource. NHF and HFA are resources. We can help you identify, hopefully, if one of these is in your plans. Maybe you have an option without a copay accumulator. And if so, that's worth pursuing. Also, just want to let everyone know that copay accumulators is a huge policy priority for both NHF and HFA. And so we are working hard at the state level and the federal level to get patient protections. Those aren't in place now. They are in some states. 12 states have protections in state regulated health plans against copay accumulators. But if you, like Marla said, if you have one of those employer sponsored plans, the state law probably doesn't protect you. And if you're outside those 12 states, you may not have protections in place. Contact us. We want to know if people are having problems, and we want to know if we can assist.
Yeah, and a question just came into the chat, and Mark, I know you've helped some folks with this exact issue, but can the insurance company change their copay accumulator policy mid-year during the year?
Fortunately, the answer is yes, and we've seen this happen on several occasions, most recently with Regents Blue Cross in Utah. They will actually, several months into the year, decide to suddenly apply it to your policy and even apply it retroactively back to the beginning of the year. Now it's very important wherever you are to try and challenge that. There may be some type of notice requirements in your state that you can rely on to show that if they were going to do this, they had to inform you in advance. But unfortunately, in states where there aren't protections against these types of mid-year changes, this is something that we are seeing.
Yeah, and it's been a great state legislative season. We've had, as Miriam said, a lot of victories, putting some protections into place. So make sure and check with your local chapter member organization and see what advocacy efforts are happening in your area, because we really know that the voices of the patients count here. We need to amplify the voices. And I can tell you that across the country, bleeding disorders have been a leader in getting this legislation passed in the states. So it's something very near and dear, as Miriam said, a huge policy priority for both organizations. A few more questions about accumulators, because as we said, this is the hot topic. But does the legislation protecting accumulator adjusters apply to the state you live in, or the state from which your policy is written? So whoever wants to take that one.
I mean, I could jump it. I mean, I would say wherever you're insured, right? So if you're insured in New York, it doesn't, so I guess in that case, it would be the policy where it's written, right? Wherever you are employed, if you're insured, if your employer's issued a policy in New York, then that's where it's covered, I would say.
Awesome.
Yeah, and again, the state law protections apply to plans regulated by that state. So, if you are working for a large employer with employees in multiple states, you are probably not in a plan that is subject to state regulation. Typically these would be ACA marketplace plans, things like that.
Awesome. Any last thoughts on accumulator, adjuster, copay assistance, premium assistance before we move on to another topic?
What I will say is, if you had one and then you had one, I said this in a presentation I did with Mark was it last week? Doesn't matter. That don't count on it, right? If you know going into open enrollment 2022, don't count on it and plan accordingly, right? If you know that, you have your option between a high deductible health plan and a PPO or POS, like consider the POS, right? Or consider not being able to use your copay assistance, because for whatever reason, it's easier to look at it clean without sort of calculating in the assistance you may or may not receive based on whether or not they allow the program.
Just like the medical side, expect the unpredictable.
Exactly.
Unpredictable. And we just put in the chat a little bit more about accumulators. Feel free to check that out on our website. Our next question has to do with some pharmacy issues. So Miriam, I guess I'll come to you to kick us off here, but the question is, my current insurance allows me to choose my own pharmacy. How do I know if they'll allow me to continue to do that?
Great question. Again, we're at open enrollment now. I would say as you're signing up for next year, absolutely check the list of preferred providers of in-network pharmacies. We have definitely seen health plans kind of, we call it bait and switch, change formularies, change provider networks mid-year. As Mark said, there are grounds to challenge that. It seems like bait and switch. It seems like it's a violation of contract law, but it can be hard, it can be hard to take on that kind of challenge.
Yeah, the follow-up question here was, can the insurance change your choice of pharmacy mid-year? So goes to that bait and switch. Absolutely. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about some of those challenges. So let's talk about rejections, exceptions, appeals. And Mark, again, I'll come to you because I know you've had some direct experience helping some patients through this. And so here's a question. We've been told that my product is no longer covered and that I need to use a different brand. How do I fight this? And do I have to switch?
That's something that's commonly called step therapy or fail first. We have seen this just like with accumulators, increasingly popping up in plans. And fortunately, there's been a lot of action against it at the state level. There's about 36 states now that have at least some form of protections against it. So chances are you're probably in one of those states, so it's worth checking to see if you have those protections available to you. Probably the most important point I can make here is, regardless of what the situation is that you're dealing with your insurer, always appeal. If you have any type of adverse determination from your insurer, all too often, people with insurance don't submit an appeal. I think something like 0.5% of people that get denied within the marketplace actually follow through and appeal the denial. And what happens is very often the insurer will just deny it to see what you're going to do, to see if you'll appeal. So you have as much as 50% of denials that ultimately get overturned. They never should have been denied in the first place. And this is a very common area where you will see it. An insurer will say, we want you to fail first on a product that is cheaper, typically inferior, one that's on our formulary, instead of the one that the physician has prescribed for you and says is the best for your medical needs. And so they'll make you go through basically another hoop, another hurdle, another obstacle in order to get the coverage that you need. And very often you'll see people that will give up at that stage. And so it's very important to always file an appeal, regardless of whether you think you're going to prevail. Even if you know that the rules may be against you, you never know what exactly the situation is. So don't simply give up. You can always go to HFA, NHF, a number of different resources who can at least help you navigate through the process and tell you what type of situation you may have and how likely it is that you'll prevail.
And let us know. We fill out a project calls form for us. We'll put that link in the chat here. But the more of those stories that we can get, we can use it when we're going to those state legislatures and to Congress to talk about how this initiative is just not safe for patients. Marla, you were going to say something.
Yeah, and I was going to piggyback off of what Mark was saying. Like a frightening number of people never appeal their decision. They just take it at face value, and it is a 0.5% for state-run plans, but I believe it's less than 5% for total plans. So whether employer-sponsored health insurance, a self-insured plan, if you work for Apple or I don't know, Sony or something like this, a large corporation, and those are what are called self-insured plans, which are very different and very regulated very differently. But what I will say is that insurers have a protocol, right? You have to get from step one. This is outside of step edits and step therapy. Like, you can't appeal a decision until you have that decision. I know that sounds, but a lot of people say that, oh, well, my pharmacy told me that this was denied. Okay, but in order to file the appeal, you will need the number and the case number that was assigned to the denial, and you'll need the code and the reason for the denial. So it's hard to really appeal based on, oh, my physician said it wasn't going to go through. We need the numbers and we need the letter, and in order for us to go to the next step. And there's always an expedited appeal, which most people don't, and you can simultaneously have a peer-to-peer review, which means that the insurance company physicians will talk to your physicians, and then they'll sort of have a peer-to-peer review. And like Mark was saying, a lot of times these are often overlooked and no one sort of challenges what they're being asked of. And I strongly encourage you, it's a process, and it won't, no one wants to see a patient fail, right? Because the it's too high. The risk is too high in this community, because what's failure? Is it a brain bleed, right? God forbid something like this. No one wants that, right? So a lot of times they don't understand what failure is in this community. So we also have to explain to them what failure is, right? I know this product works. I know this product has not given me an inhibitor or right? This is what I'm currently prescribed. So both of our organizations ask that this remains a decision between provider and patient. That's it. Dispense is written.
And every provider I know of is more than willing to help you with this. Miriam, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback onto what Marla said. And even for the non-expedited appeals, there are time limits. So unfortunately, you can't sit on this and fret and stew for too long. You have to act within 30 or 60 days. There should be instructions in your plan documents, possibly on the back of your insurance card, of where your first step is. But again, we're also here to help. Your HTC social worker can give you advice. If you're in one of those large group employer plans, you're probably going to be starting with your HR department versus with an insurance company if you're in an ECA plan. But there should be a breadcrumb trail for you to follow in your plan documents. And if you can't figure it out, reach out to someone who can help, and do so, mindful of those deadlines. Mark, it looked like you wanted to add.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, following up on a very important point Marla made, you have a right to a written denial. Make sure that you ask for it. If somebody tells you over the phone that a claim is denied, do not accept that. You need that, just like she was saying, you need that letter in writing in order to actually go forward with an appeal. So Never just accept at face value that a provider has said or an insurer has said your claim is denied. Make sure that you exercise that right to get it in writing.
Be tenacious and look at the resources. I mean, the brain power right here, willing to go to battle for you. Please reach out. Marla?
We'll go down that rabbit hole for you so you don't have to. And we often do it together. So these are, I mean, these are, normally I say I'm not a lawyer, but they are, so it works. So,
well,
I mean,
Miriam and Mark are, but, and you know,
are.
we can't solve it for you, but we can certainly point you in the right direction, and help give you the script and the like you said, that breadcrumb, knowing what to look for and how to move forward. Anything else on appeals and exceptions, claim rejections before we hop on to the next topic here?
I will just add a little bit about medical necessity. I think oftentimes people forget that medical necessity is still, you know, a thing, and a lot of plans will allow you. I mean, it's not like because I said so, medical necessity. There needs to be a very, you know, detailed response from your provider in terms of why that is medically necessary and why that treatment modality works best for you and your, you know.
It's a great point, because there's some of our products that maybe are only approved for a certain condition or a certain disorder, and don't have the indication for the others. So it's a great great point. I got a question coming in, so I'm going to ask that. Is there a time limit on when an insurance company can re-review a claim and process it so that you have to pay more on a bill that you have already paid? This individual had it happen for a service that was over a year old. They had previously had trouble with this particular claim. The insurance company never responded to the appeal. Who wants to tackle it?
That's a tough one. So, because I learned this the hard way, trial and error with my son when he's now 19, but when he was much younger. And how, like, you have to pay your claim. You have to pay your copay when you go to the physician, right? When the physician bills the insurance company is a different timeline. When that insurance company then pays out to the provider is an entirely different timeline. So yes, that can happen, right? I'm a little confused by the not responding to the appeal, because as Mark said, you do have that right. They have to provide you in writing the reason that the either first appeal or second appeal was denied, or the expedited appeal. But you should not have to pay more than your fair, you know, than what you currently paid if it was a copay, in my opinion.
Mark, anything from you?
Yeah, this, in addition to what Marla said, this situation would also restart your appeal rights. So you certainly would be able to go back in and appeal. Any adverse determination they make against you would do that. And so, you know, that would basically start your process all over again of being able to challenge it. So if this was something they could not do under their rules, you certainly could attack that.
Let's move on to another kind of unsavory topic. It's kind of where we are tonight with insurance, kind of a little bit, isn't it? But let's talk a little bit about surprise billing. And Mark, I'll come to you. This individual says, I went to an emergency room at a hospital and that was in my insurer's network, but because they use out-of-network providers in the emergency room, I got a surprise bill. What's my recourse?
You certainly have a right to appeal, as with any other adverse decision. This is something that we saw happen very frequently before in the last couple of years. Many states have started to combat it through no fault of your own. You show up at an in-network provider and have absolutely no way of knowing that many of the providers that they contract with inside of that facility are actually out of network. And so after you are discharged or after you come home, you receive a bill that can be a couple $100, couple $1,000, even $100,000 or more if it involved an ambulance or an emergency room. So this was really a horrible situation for a number of people that we have a lot of good news about in the last couple of years, and especially within the last year. We have some 33 states already that have tried to attack it. 18 of them have laws that are considered very good, very comprehensive. And the federal government just passed a law, the No Surprises Act, that would actually go beyond what all of these states had done. It hasn't in any way undone any of these state laws. It's meant to supplement it. And it basically now would apply to all plans, whether it's a state regulated plan or one of the large group and self-funded plans that the federal government regulates. So it's something very good to see. It's a protection that you have. And it specifically extended the appeal rights that you have under the Affordable Care Act. So your right to either an internal review or an external review will now apply to a surprise billing situation. So you certainly have the right to appeal. And just like I said before, make sure that you do that. Even if it's a situation that you don't understand why you got the bill or your provider is telling you you've been billed correctly, chances are, again, if you went to an in-network provider and you're being charged out-of-network charges, that is something you can appeal and have corrected, because either under the new federal law or most of these state laws, you as a patient are not expected to pay any more than what you would have paid had those providers been in-network.
And a quick clarifying, just because we've used this phrase a couple of times, a peer-to-peer review. That is when your treater, your healthcare provider, does speak to someone at your insurance company. Typically, it is another medical provider at your insurance company, but it's not always a hematologist. They're just a medical provider. But the individual asks the question, is there greater success going that route in an appeals process through a peer-to-peer review?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if there's any data that would suggest that one is better than the other. It's kind of, you just throw it all out there at the same time, because you could do lots of them at the same time. So it's hard to know explicitly what works and what doesn't work in one scenario versus another. What I will say is that it may not even be a hematologist, which upset like it may be a lot of people are upset with right, and a lot of people are upset when they say peer-to-peer because they automatically assume it is at least a board certified hematologist, right? No. It's not necessarily that is the case. It's not, I mean, they are usually medical doctors, there's that. So, but I just don't want to give people the false sense that they can go in there and request a board certified hematologist, let alone an HTC hematologist. It's not going to be that. It's going to be just, a physician of some sort.
Right. Miriam?
No, I was just going to say this is where your comment, Sanja, about persisting comes back into play. And so that doesn't work. Keep escalating up the chain.
My grandmother used to say, I'm stubborn. And I said, no, I'm determined. So be determined, be determined. As I mentioned before, it has been a successful legislative year, and we have another legislative win this year. And Marla, large part due to NHF's efforts in our last Washington days in person, but would love to hear you talk a little bit more about the SNF Skilled Nursing Facility Access Act and share a little bit of insights about it.
It was a long road, and it would not have been possible without every voice in this community, specifically a lot of the social workers. It was the first thing I worked on when I joined NHF 10 years ago. And I mean, I'm still here. I mean, I don't know what else to say, right? I got to know a lot of the older community members. And what I will say is that it went into effect October 1st. what it does is, in theory, it facilitates patients that are able to now access a skilled nursing facility. Why a skilled nursing facility? Well, because if you're younger and healthier, sure, you can go to an inpatient rehab facility, right? Because you can withstand that number of hours of physical and occupational therapy. But if you're not, and let's say you're older and more fragile, then you can go to a step down facility, which is called a skilled nursing facility. I should add that this is only for Medicare beneficiaries, because in my experience, a lot of state Medicaid programs do allow a factor to be billed for separately. Similarly, a lot of private insurance companies do allow for factor to be billed separately in a rehab situation. So this is only for Medicare. So what it does is it allows for factor to be billed separately in Medicare, right? So this removes the biggest deterrent that it had for for facilities to accept patients, which was the cost of factor, because SNFs bundle their payment. Medicare reimburses a bundle payment, right? And they allow a few limited items to be billed outside of that bundle. We just had all bleeding disorder treatment. So not just clotting factor therapies. This is for all inherited blood disorders. And that's important, because every year we will submit and update the billing codes, the J code specifically, that will be added to the list, right? So we just needed to make that inroad, which allowed for treatment to be billed for outside of this bundle. So hopefully we have it works in that, you know, it is CMS, it is a government agency, so it does take a little while to process, but we are on our website. I did develop an FAQ, not an FAQ, it's kind of like an FAQ about the Hemophilia SNF Access Act, and it is for community members and for families and caregivers. So this way they have something in hand which will explain specifically, like most of the time the facility just doesn't want to listen, right? They don't want to, you know, you're like, please don't hang up, you can bill for it separately. And they're like, oh, okay, sorry, my bad, right? It takes away that barrier, and it allows you to have something in your hand which will reference the passage of the Hemophilia SNF Access Act, and it will allow at least the facility to reconsider, right? And it will allow when the discharge nurse, which may not in fact be affiliated at all with the HTC, may not know specifically about bleeding disorders at all, right? Outside of yourself, have access to that sort of FAQ, and we will be updating it. And we're in the process of updating it, and we're in the process of developing materials for treatment centers, for billers, for people who are more into the billing aspect. I only know the policy part. I don't know how to bill, but we will be having some of that. We are developing that, and it should be rolled out soon, because there's a complication. There is a Medicare matters article, and I'll just look it up real quick and drop those links in the chat. Oh, can I do that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I would say as a longtime community member, the really interesting thing about policy is that it doesn't always happen overnight. And so we have to go back and ask over and over and over again. And that seems laborious, but it's important because we do finally get our voices heard. I think a great example of that is lifetime caps. You know, it took a lot of doing, but with the Affordable Care Act, we finally got rid of those. Miriam, I want to come to you next.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think I dropped them in the chat, and I'm not sure if it goes to everybody, but what I will say is in that article, there are 2 links, and I did provide the fact sheet link, but also in there is another link, which is from CMS on Medicare and specifically billing. So if anyone has any questions, they could feel free and reach out to me.
And it looks like it didn't go to everybody, so I'll ask our webinar
Yes.
support folks to copy and
Okay.
paste and make sure it goes to
Okay.
our attendees tonight. But Miriam, I'll come to you. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the clock here too. We've got about 15 minutes remaining. I know this has been a very passionate project of yours this year, topic of yours, but the American Rescue Plan and the subsidies that came about from that. You want to share a little bit about that and what people should be thinking about as they approach open enrollment this year?
Absolutely. And I invite my friends and colleagues to join in. But the American Rescue Plan Act was passed this past spring, and it was very COVID focused. Congress and all of our lawmakers in Washington realized COVID has cut a huge swath through our country, through the world. People have lost jobs. They wanted to make it easier for people to keep or get coverage if they had lost coverage. It's noteworthy for a lot of reasons. I mean, one is this is actually the first time that Congress has been able to act to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. So the Rescue Plan Act did a couple of things. It really boosted the subsidies available for people to buy ACA marketplace insurance. This is temporary. This was a temporary change. And these enhancements, these more generous subsidies are in place for 2021 and 2022. The big fight that is going on in Washington, D.C. right now about the reconciliation bill, a portion of that fight is about making these more generous subsidies permanent. But what the American Rescue Plan Act means is that for people who previously earned too much to qualify for any subsidies, people who earned over 400% of the federal poverty level, which roughly speaking is $50,000 for an individual, $106,000 for a family of four. People in that category used to be in what's called, they're facing the subsidy cliff. So you earn $1 more than that and you get no subsidies. You earn under that and you're entitled to subsidies. And that's important because insurance can be really, really expensive. So the American Rescue Plan Act boosted subsidies at every income level. There no longer is a subsidy cliff. Even people in those middle class wage bands above 400% of the federal poverty level are now eligible for subsidies, so such that no one has to pay more than 8.5% of their income for a silver tier plan. And you don't have to buy a silver tier plan. You can take those subsidies and apply them to the plan of your choice in the marketplace. For people earning at lower incomes, the subsidies really went up. And in some cases, the assistance with out-of-pocket costs also went up. So for people earning at 150% of the federal poverty level, so that is like roughly $19,000 for an individual, they can get a zero premium plan and substantial assistance with their out-of-pocket costs. What does this mean? It means if you in the past looked at the marketplace and said, that's too expensive for me, go back. We're in this open enrollment period, go back, because you now may find your costs a lot lower. It also means if you in the past bought insurance off the marketplace because the marketplace insurance was too expensive, whether that was a clone of a marketplace plan or a skimpier plan, like a short-term plan or an association health plan, go back to the marketplace for 2022, because these subsidies are only available for marketplace plans. And you can get better coverage, better financial protection, and get subsidies to get that coverage if you go to the marketplace.
Mark, yes, come on. Well, I'm sorry, Miriam. Let me see
No,
what
please.
Mark has to add here.
Yeah, just to add on to that, one of the biggest benefits that we've seen is not only has this made plans, marketplace plans, affordable for people who previously couldn't buy coverage, but it's made the type of coverage a lot more affordable for people that previously had maybe only a bronze or a silver plan. Now with these enhanced subsidies, they're able to purchase a gold or even a platinum plan where their out-of-pocket costs are greatly reduced. And they can have a deductible that is much, much lower than they had under the bronze plan, just because of these subsidies.
Marla, any additions?
And what I will say is that the options are better. So like Miriam said, if you look several years ago, you saw, oh, it's only one insurer with like 5. There are more insurers in the marketplace in almost every state. And even for 2022 with the enhanced subsidies, the premiums have risen somewhere between, at most 4%, I believe is what the current, which is less than the cost of inflation. So the premiums are fairly stable. The marketplaces are stable. There are more insurers. So just because you looked 5 years ago, please look again now, because people are saving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And it's not like a myth. It's not like a fantasy. Like I personally know people who I've helped that have saved hundreds of dollars per month by looking at a marketplace plan. And what I will add to that is, because of the public health emergency, a lot of state-based marketplaces are having year-round enrollment as well. So you may qualify for a special enrollment period.
Miriam?
So the special enrollment periods were open across the country until I think August 15th. The government and the federal marketplaces said everyone's got a free shot to come back in and enroll, whether you had insurance, whether you had a qualifying life event, you can come back in and enroll. In most marketplaces, that special enrollment period, and this is just for coverage for the rest of 2021. Most places, that special enrollment period is over. But if you're experiencing a qualifying life event now, you can get insurance for the rest of 2021. And there was one particular benefit in 2021 again, with this focus on COVID and the economic impact of COVID. In 2021, if you experienced unemployment and qualified for unemployment insurance benefits, you qualify for a 0 premium health plan with substantial cost sharing assistance for the rest of the year. This isn't in place for the coming year. It's again part of the reconciliation bill. We would love to see it be enacted. But if you are still in that period where you can go into the marketplace now, you don't have insurance, you did experience unemployment, you qualified for unemployment insurance benefits, please run, don't walk, get yourself covered. You can do so very affordably.
Even if you did
also
not
time
receive that unemployment, all you had to do was qualify. You didn't have to actually receive unemployment during the year.
Awesome. So I think it's safe to say that, usually we talk a little bit about insurance. We even started, the title of this session is Barriers to Care, but there's a lot of positive energy coming around right now in terms of policy. And so as we start to wrap up, we only have about 6 minutes left. Would love to hear from each of you. What's the one thing that you'd love to make sure that our bleeding disorders community and family knows as we end out 2021 and head into 2022? And I'll start with Marla. Sorry, Marla, you're on the left.
I was having a deep thought, and I was like, what do I want people to know? What do I want people to know is, okay, I'll just take a moment. Open your mail. I really want you to open your mail, whether it's email, whether it's snail mail, insurers will send you notifications for things they have to, as Mark was saying, by law. A lot of things need to be in writing. They will notify you. So if you're not opening your mail, whether it's email or regular mail, please open your mail, because you can't say, oh, I didn't know. And then they're like, we sent you an email and you actually opened it, because we can see that. And, and people overlook that. What do I want people to know is that, we have your back. We get it. Like, this is not an easy task. None of it has been easy. Looking at plans is never easy. It is never fun. But like, know that we're here to help you, and we cannot make, will not make the decision for you, because insurance is a very personal decision, because I can't tell you what you can and cannot afford. I also can't tell you, if you forget to tell me something, then it turns out that that provider is not in network. Well, I can't be responsible for that. So, I mean, we can guide you and help you make the most informed decision you can.
Thank you. Mark, I'll come to you next.
Oh, I guess our best advice whenever we do these insurance sessions is always to make sure you shop around. You may be very happy with the plan that you had for the past year. Insurance coverage, benefits, rules are always changing constantly. Don't assume that what you had for the last year is automatically what you're going to have for the next year. And very often there is a better plan out there for you if you take the time and do the research. We know it's a lot of work. We know it can be very confusing. And just like Marla said, we're here for you to help you through that process. But very often it can be worth spending that time to shop around.
I liken it to when my grocery store reconfigured. They're selling the same stuff, but it's not in the right places. So I went somewhere else. Miriam, coming to you next.
I totally echo what Marla and Mark said and say, I just went on an excited rant about how premiums are cheaper because of the new subsidies. And I stand by all of that, and I'm very excited about it. But do not just look at premiums as you are doing this review that Marla and Mark have both encouraged you to do. Please, please, please consider the out-of-pocket costs that come with your plan. Consider the deductibles. Look for the copay accumulators. Mark, in a conversation with some of us, pointed out that low premiums come with high deductibles, and really looking at the deductible and the out-of-pocket is sort of the quickest metric to judge the robustness and the richness of an insurance plan. So really think about, is saving $20 a month on the premium worth having a deductible that will deter me from going to the doctor? It probably isn't. So that is my word of wisdom to add to my esteemed colleagues.
Well, thank you so much to the three of you. As I said at the top of the hour, we are really, truly very lucky as bleeding disorders patients to have you. Again, your minds are just brilliant. We are truly leaders in rare disease amongst the two organizations, and a lot of that is due in large part to the three of you and the work that you do. So thank you. Just as we wrap up this evening, I do want to mention that HFA will be having our virtual fly-in and week of advocacy coming up November 15th through the 19th. So pay attention to your email and your social media accounts, because we'll be talking a lot more about these issues and asking you to reach out to your Congress representatives and senators to speak to them and ask about some of the policy priorities that are important to us as a bleeding disorders community. But again, just want to say thank you. The session evaluation will launch automatically in your internet browser. So it won't launch in Zoom, it'll launch in your internet browser. If you have pop-up windows blocked, it may not come up, but be on the lookout for that. We truly, truly value those evaluations, as any organization does, but it really does help guide us for the next year. Make sure, if you're interested in being part of our prize drawing each day, that you do put your name on the evaluation. We are drawing those prizes each day, so stay tuned there. And otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow night. I guess the one last thing I'll say is if you're really loving insurance, want to join us Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to play a little game of Insurance Jeopardy. So we'd love to have you back then. So in other words, have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow night during symposium programming, and thank you. Good night.